Okay. And if you can all mute yourselves, so then when, all right, so let me introduce the person leading our meditation tonight, Dr. Michael Nagler. He is the Professor Emeritus of Classics and Comparative Literature at UC Berkeley. He co-founded one of the first peace and conflict studies programs in the United States. In 1981, he also co-founded the Metta Center for Nonviolence, where he continues to dedicate his life to the values of nonviolence and spiritual discovery. Among many achievements, his commitment to these principles earned him the Jamnalal Bajaj International Award in 2007 for promoting Gandhian Values Outside India. Nagler is the co-host of Nonviolence Radio, a popular radio show and podcast focused on exploring nonviolence. He has authored numerous articles and influential books, including The Search for a Nonviolent Future, The Nonviolence Handbook, and The Third Harmony. In 2020, he directed and produced an award-winning documentary on nonviolence, also titled The Third Harmony. A sought-after speaker, teacher, and mentor, he is actively involved in peace efforts at the Metta Center for Nonviolence. And with that, I will turn it over to Michael.
Thank you so much, Lynn. And by the way, Sharna, I wanted to say there are a lot of middle-aged kids in the world. So that was an interesting slip of the tongue. Yeah, I never was a formal, well, actually, when I was 12 years old, I decided to go to the local synagogue. We were a non-practicing Jewish family. And my main interest, I think, was to infuriate my father, which worked. But knowing myself now, I think there also was an interest which I was not aware of at the time, which was an interest in spirituality. So then I come out to Berkeley in 1960, just about in time for the free speech movement. And we've been actually watching films about the free speech movement recently and reading about Joni Baez and Bob Dylan, and I've been weeping copiously the whole time. But in 1966, I was in a bit of a bad emotional state, really, kind of an existential crisis. I always say an existential crisis is like any other crisis, but it's in Berkeley. So I had everything going for me, but still really felt a deep sense of emptiness. And at that point, fortunately, or by synchronicity, by the grace of God, I met a meditation teacher who imparted to me this method, which I'd like to share with you today, assuming that you're not already familiar with it. And it's very simple, and I have found it very effective. I've been practicing it for half a century. It really works. So it's called passage meditation because it's basically a silent meditation practice, because the point is to withdraw our attention, or what they would call in India our prana, from the physical plane, including our own physical body, and concentrate it on the mind with the effort, the goal of getting the mind to be still. And when the mind is still, if you have made it still by conscious effort in this way, then wisdom itself will shine forth. And I guess I can vouch for that in a small way. My mind is not still, but it's slower than it used to be when I was growing up in Brooklyn. That is for sure. And the stiller it gets, the more I feel peace, and the more I feel an understanding, a wisdom coming to me about what makes people work and why we have so much violence in the world, so on and so forth. So, but setting aside the nonviolence part of my life for the time being, I do this meditation practice a lot. And the way it works is we take an inspirational passage. Like very often, we recommend that people start with the prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Because it's a decent size, it's not overwhelming, and it's got a perfect thrust, which is to take all the negative energies in our mind and convert them to positive energies. This is perhaps where nonviolence fits in, because in nonviolence, you are actually working with your fear and anger, but you're converting them to courage and compassion. So what you now want to do, okay, you've memorized this passage, you want to sit reasonably straight. Traditionally, the suggestion, the recommendation is with the back, neck, and head in a straight line. That is to facilitate the rise of some kind of mysterious energy that travels more or less up the spinal column. I say more or less because this isn't entirely a physical thing, but it has some kind of a mapping onto our physical body. Well, we don't need to worry about that. What we just want to do is memorize the passage, and then we close our eyes gently and go through the words of the passage. And so what we're doing now is we're focusing our mind exclusively on those words. I'll get back to that in a minute. And then slowing down the passage so that the passage slows down the mind. In other words, you couple the speed of thinking to that passage that you're reciting to yourself mentally, and then you slow that down, and that slows down the thinking process itself. Don't mind those little pings you might be hearing. That's Stephanie asking me if I got on the meditation. Then all right. So I'll have to tell her later. If any of you have her email, just tell her I'm due. It's fine. I'm on it. Anyway, so we go through the words of the passage as slowly as we reasonably can. If you go too slowly, you'll find that the meaning dissolves and all kinds of distractions break in. And that is really what we are working to overcome, what we are working to prevent. However, like most of you, I'm a human being, and the mind has not been trained for the first half of my life, and it goes on like a merry-go-round if left to its own devices. And what that means is, as I'm going through the words of the passage, other thoughts will be going. There'll be a second track, or worst thing that'll happen is, and this has not happened to me in a long time, I'm happy to say, the worst thing that happens is you completely forget, where were you? Or am I meditating or playing tennis? And what passage was I using? In that extreme case, just take your mind gently but firmly back to the beginning of the passage and start it all over again. And like most people who are, intelligent and socially conscious, the mind doesn't like that. And that is our great, what shall I say, our mechanism, our tool. That is how we train the mind. We say, if you drop the passage, you're going right back to the beginning, starting all over again. The mind says, oh, no, sorry, don't make me do that. So, but short of that kind of interruption, that kind of disruption, as I say, what can happen is little distractions can keep chattering away. It's very hard to avoid those. And the practice is not to pay attention to them. The minute you say, why are you doing that? To your mind, you now have two distractions. You know, the one that first came up and now this conversation that you're carrying. So we just try to go through the words of the memorized passage. It should be an inspirational passage, because what's going to happen is the meaning of the passage will sink in. And the slower and the more concentrated you are, the more effectively it will sink in. And so while you have an opportunity here to reprogram your mind, it only makes sense that you want to program it with positive content. And that doesn't mean that we're suppressing our anger and our fear, our anxiety, our doubts. We're not suppressing them, but mysteriously, somehow they are being transferred. They're being transmuted into corresponding positives. We're not doing that consciously, but it's happening in the background, and that's truly a wonderful thing. Now, what we do normally is for people who are just starting out with this, we recommend that they meditate for half an hour in the morning. Early morning, definitely before you turn on your email, okay? You want to prepare the mind with this positive energy before the negativity and the confusion of the world pours in on you. So it may well happen that you'll get to the end of the prayer before the half hour is up, in which case you can just start it again. Or if this is happening pretty regularly, let's say now you have made meditation a regular practice of your life, which actually I strongly recommend. You've been using that passage now for a month or so, and yeah, it's a lovely passage, but it is getting boring. It's starting to, the term that we use, it's starting to get stale. The words are not evoking anything anymore. No problem. Go on to another passage. I must have about 30, 35 passages more or less well memorized that I use now and cycle through for my meditations. Now, this technique was developed in India, but it was also used in the West. There's a very good description of it by Simone Weil, where she talks about how she used to pray the Lord's Prayer. And I think that really is the basics. Choose an inspirational passage, memorize it, go through the words of that passage as slowly as you can without losing the thread. When you have a distraction, don't fight it, just concentrate more on the passage. And if all is lost or the passage is gone, you find yourself arguing with your neighbor or something like that, go back to the beginning and start over again. So we have about 5 or more minutes for questions, and I'd be happy to entertain them if you have any. I can add perhaps one thing, that if you do take to this and you've been doing it for a while and you find that you want more, we don't recommend a longer meditation passage. What we do recommend is adding a half hour in the evening. And that's really nice. As Gandhi said, prayer opens the gate of the morning and closes the bolt of the evening. That makes a real beautiful bookending for your day.
Hi, Michael. Just a quick question about the selection of the passages. Do you have any guidelines, like could a piece of Rumi's poetry serve that purpose, or would you recommend prayers?
I use a poem of Rumi's that we call The Garden Beyond Paradise. It starts, everything you see has its source in the unseen world. Yeah, that would be terrific. Now, the Blue Mountain Center publishes a book called God Makes the Rivers to Flow. And you can order that from them, bmcm.org, or maybe it's now easwaran.org, EASWARAN.org, or look for it in a local bookstore. It's in that wonderful bookstore in San Rafael. I'm pretty sure, it used to be anyway. And that book, God Makes the Rivers to Flow, has probably about 40 or 50 passages. And you can pick ones that you like. And I imagine that you interfaith people will not give me a lot of trouble with my next recommendation, which is to take passages from different faiths. Because each religion, as far as I can see, has its window onto the truth, and none has the whole truth. So I'm right now using a passage from Ansari of Herat, who's Sufi, from Rumi, who is also technically Sufi, of course, the Lord's Prayer, and many selections from the Sanskrit Upanishads. So it really makes for a very rich formula, furniture, so I meant to say, rich furniture for your mind. Any other questions?
So shall we embark?
And why not? Yeah, let's embark. If it's all right with you people, now for rank beginners, I would not say let's do half an hour, because that's a bit much. But you're not rank beginners, so I'm going to say this. I'll shut off my video and my audio and my mouth.
We do
And we
finish
can.
by 6:30, so maybe we can do 20 minutes and then have some reflection
Okay.
at the end.
Very good. Very good, Lynn. Let's do that. Okay. And will you make a noise at 6:20?
Sure, I will do that.
Okay. Very good. Well, people, good luck.
I'm going to call us back now. And I'm going to stop the recording.